She gives me money in offering. Yeah, she's a generous soul indeed. People say I'm a gold digger. Well, they just don't understand me. She gives me money.
Now people say I'm a gold digger, but I'm just trying to make your soul bigger. Now people say I'm a gold digger, but I'm just trying to make your soul bigger. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead. The cutie bomb met her at a beauty salon with the baby Louis Vuitton under her underarm. She don't hear me when I tell her about the kids with no mom and how the money she has can help them kids to live on. She wants to spend it on her nails and her hair instead of buying kids food, clothes they can wear. She really needs to see that if she followed Jay-Z, she'd be storing up her treasures for eternity. Now people say I'm a gold digger, but I'm just trying to make your soul bigger. Now people say I'm a gold digger, but I'm just trying to make your soul bigger. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead. 18 years he's been coming to church for over 18 years. Every time the bucket passes, says this isn't for me. He's spending all of his hard-earned money with no security. Bought a new flat screen to watch the game on Sunday. He's barely getting by to finance a new Hyundai. Attempts to go and buy bliss with his money. I don't know who you're trying to impress with your money. You need to pray to God, confess your hearts with your money. And all along you should have been generous with your money. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead, give now. Give now, girl, go ahead.
All right. I feel like that was completely lost on a few of you out there, but a lot of you knew what was happening. Anyway, today we're wrapping up our series called Greater Than, and we've just been talking about like where we feel God's leading us, but also where God is leading us as individuals to come together. So for one more time, if you will allow me, I'm going to recap kind of our 2-year vision, where we're headed, and what God is doing. And in this message today, we have two kind of big, fun, exciting announcements. So Philippians chapter 2 is where we start. This is our key verse, our message. Philippians 2:3 goes like this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others greater than yourselves. So when you're pulling out of the drive out there and looks like there's only enough room for one car because of the concrete, right, that we're having rebuilt, be sure to stay all the way over to the right because there's people going to consider them greater than yourself. Anyway, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Nobody does this, right? This is not something we experience in the world, that we would actually put other people ahead of ourselves. I was driving with my daughter the other day, and we were parking the car, and I watched people fight to get their car parked as close as they possibly could so they could walk 20 less feet than if they just parked down a little ways, right? Because and I think it's really funny when that happens when you're at the gym. You ever have that happen? We're like, just looking for a good spot. I don't want to have to walk any farther than I have before I work out for an hour. Anyway, some of you are just hanging out. You're like, you go to the gym? Anyway, so anyway, you just never see this happen, and yet that's what Christ has called us to do. He's called us to be different than everybody on the planet. So just very, very specifically, we came to you, and this requires a lot. Obviously, the ministry of Flair, plugging in, the personal relationships you have with people. I mean, this is a big process that Christ calls all of us to. Very specifically, as a church, we shared our 2-year vision, and it looks like this. This is just a snapshot of it all. We want to hit stability as a church, pay off some things, look towards the future. Discipleship, we want to not only add a pastor for this, but we also want to add programs for this. We want to hire a youth pastor. This is such a huge need. Hire a youth pastor and give a budget for that ministry and be able to reach middle school, high school, and young adults in our area online, and church planting. Ultimately, we're wanting to get to a place where we are a part of this movement that we feel like God has called us to, where we are planting churches like crazy. So, again, last week, if you weren't here, this is kind of the call to action that we gave to you. It looks like this. We ask you to consider the next one. We ask you to consider where you're at. Because maybe you're in a situation where you're new to the faith and you've never given $1 before in your life. Or maybe you've been in the faith for a while and you can find yourself somewhere else on this spectrum. But God does call us to excel in this grace of giving. He wants us to be generous people. So we wanted to ask you to find out where you were on this. And so just to be clear, and clarity is always something we try to do as much as we can. So last week we had these magnet boards off to the side. And during the communion time, what we ask you to do is let these magnets signify an increase, okay? Just to be clear, the magnet represents what you're increasing, okay? So if, and I know I might sound like I'm talking to elementary students, but I want to make sure everybody understands this. So if you were giving $10 a week before this, and you took a magnet that said you were going to do $10, how much are you giving now? 20. All right. Woo! You did it live from Taylor, Michigan. Okay, so just wanted to be clear. I wanted to be crystal clear what you're doing. These magnets represent what you are increasing. So last week we came to you and we asked you that, and we had this big moment. If you weren't here, or maybe you were here and you've been praying about it, we just want you to understand this is something we want to continue to happen. So after the service, maybe during communion, at any point you feel led, maybe when everybody clears out of here, you're like, you know what, we prayed about it, I'm ready, I'm in, I want to signify my increase. I want to reiterate, when you take a magnet, we are banking on that. Like that's literally, we're going to like go and make hires and adjustments and base our budget off of that. So don't take a magnet because you're like, I like magnets, those are fun. Like this is a real thing. Anyway, with that, what we had happen last week is we set up communion tables and everybody came forward and it was just a huge response. And I want to kind of clarify what happened and I want to kind of show what God's been up to this whole time. So this is our first fun announcement. Our goal was this number, $565,500, right? That's our goal. I want to talk about that number for just a second. How we arrived at that was just kind of interesting. You wouldn't know this from the outside looking in, but internally, we just started writing some things down that we felt like we were ready to do. Like we're ready to hire a youth pastor. We're ready to hire a discipleship pastor. I mean, that's something that we need to be able to do. The only thing that we're lacking is the finances, right? So we wrote some things like that. We kind of made up some round numbers as far as what budgets would look like. We don't know specifically what all is going to happen in each of those departments. So we kind of put some generalizations out there, and we kind of arrived at $500,000. And then we were just like, just through some events and some emails, I don't even remember the day it happened, but all of a sudden we were at 565. And I was like, oh, I thought we were going to say 500. And they were like, no, 565. And I'm like, okay. In fact, one of our leaders was like, just go with it. Now, let me be clear. We're not haphazard by any means, right? But it was just sort of an interesting number, right? It's not like an even 500 or an even 550 or whatever. It's kind of a fun number. So this is how we arrived at that, and not really knowing at all what your response would be. Now, the thing about it is, here's how we thought this would work. We would throw this up here, and you guys would look at it, and you would be like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. And then we'd come back to you and be like, hey, guys, of $565,000 increase in the budget, what we've discovered is, man, we need $265,000 more. That's kind of, honestly, that's what I thought we'd come up here and say, hey, we're going to move towards our goal, because there's no way for you to know how we're close or not on the first week, right? So here's what happened. We come up with this $565,000 number, and then we ask you one time to make commitments. And let me just show you what God did. Last week, this is what we brought in commitments. $564,980. There's just no way that happens, right? There's just no way that happens, except that this, we just feel really compelled. This is where God wants us to go. Now, just to be clear here, if some of you are out there going, man, I'm going to make my commitment today. Now you're going, we're going to Texas Roadhouse today, honey. You know you're thinking it too. No. I want to, honestly, some of us as a leaders are like, well, let's not tell them, right? Let's not tell them where we're at. We'll just see how big we can do this thing, right? We are actually still moving forward, and here's what I want to put towards you. I think, here's my question. I kind of wonder, like, wow, what's God got planned? How does God want to exceed? We're talking about planting 2 churches in the next couple of years. Like, that's a big deal. And God's like, I want to plant 10. Maybe we're bringing in a youth minister, and God's like, man, this youth ministry is going to blow up, and you're going to need like massive help with that. You're going to need something incredible. I mean, God's got way bigger plans than we are. So we want to continue to move forward, and instead of just going, okay, yeah, I want you to be considering, no, what has God laid on your heart? And what does he want you to do? And we'd still love to have those commitments. Now, with that, another fun announcement that we get to make is one of our big things that we've been looking at is the youth ministry. And we are long past due of needing a full-time youth minister because there is just such an opportunity out there. This past summer, met a guy, just kind of coincidentally, and just started to talk with him a little bit, and he was like, yeah, I'm looking for a youth ministry. He lives in Jackson, and I'm like, we're hoping that one day, down the road that we'll be able to hire a youth pastor. And so we've been talking a little bit, and we've actually had him come and speak here at a youth event before. And through the process and just with what we brought in last week, we feel really confident to go ahead and hire our first full-time youth pastor at LifeBridge. So I want to introduce him today. I asked Trevor Hyde to come on out. Where's he at? There he is. That's your cue. So this is Trevor Hyde. This is what's really cool about Trevor. Trevor is a part of a ministry where he goes around and he teaches. He's a beatboxer. He is a skateboarder, but first of all, he's a teacher of the gospel. And so he's had a ministry for the last 7 to 9 years, something like that. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Stay True Ministries is something that I founded when I was in college. I currently was actively traveling as a professional skateboarder and keynote speaker for a faith-based action sports team. They traveled the world. They presented the gospel through action sports. It was really cool. Got my feet wet in doing this kind of ministry that really reached out to radical groups, right? So, like, I put this ministry together that does professional skateboard demos, beatbox performances, believe it or not, and presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ, and for some moments going into schools and doing motivational messages. So I've had a great opportunity of being able to do that for past 9 years of my life, and it's been really awesome.
Very cool. It's exciting to have 2 beatboxers on staff.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's exciting. No, he's been doing that, and he's just a phenomenal speaker, and I think you guys are going to love him when you hear him speak. But one of the other things, when you're coming to LifeBridge, like just to help us get to know you a little bit, what's something you're excited about with the youth ministry?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be really cool to reach out into the community, to reach out into the young people. There's tons of young people in this community that are unreached, you know what I'm saying? So like, what I love about this church is it's so community driven. I mean, there's bowling alleys in the entryway. All right, cool. That's great. I like that. So I'm really excited. Who's a teenager in here? Raise your hand if you're a teenager. If you're a teenager, raise your hand. Yeah. Teenagers, I'm really excited to see you guys go deeper in your faith, to discover Jesus for yourself in a deeper way than you ever have before. I'm really passionate about seeing teenagers grow in their faith with Jesus. So is anybody else here passionate about stuff like that? Like teenagers coming to really grow deeper in their faith with Jesus. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm really excited to see that happen through LifeBridge Church. It'll be really cool. So
That's awesome. So we're going to get to know Trevor a lot upcoming. One of the things I've noticed at your events that you do, at an event, he will actually line up some people and he will jump over them with a skateboard. And so I'd kind of like him to do that this morning.
Oh, no.
Just personally.
Nobody wants to see that, Grant. Nobody.
Do you think?
Oh, okay.
See, I thought
Well,
they
all
probably
right.
would.
You want to pick somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I
pick
mean, I'm
some.
not prepared. Really, I'm not prepared. I don't have
So-
a board here or anything. But
Do
I
we
guess
have any high school seniors in here? If you're a senior this year, go ahead and raise your hand.
really
real
not
high.
prepared.
Real
Really
high.
not prepared.
Right here. Yeah. We're pointing to somebody. Do I
Yeah.
see him? Come on up.
High schooler, come on
I
up
don't
here.
even see where you're at.
Gonna put your life in
Yeah,
danger.
come on up. We're going to put your
All right,
life in
good.
danger.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. This is going to be great.
Perfect.
First
Yes.
victim.
This big. Yeah, volunteer is what you meant.
Yeah,
Yes, that's what
volunteer.
you
She
meant.
was like, yes, I want to do
What's your
this.
name, young lady?
Elizabeth.
Give it up for Elizabeth. Come on. All right. Now go ahead and lay on your back with your feet here and your head here. Perfect. And if you're willing, just scoot back a little bit and put your feet down. Keep your knees. Awesome. So don't move. Don't put your head up. Don't decide to take a selfie when I'm in it in midair, or else I'll take your head off on accident, and your parents will kill me, okay? Grant, you want to hold this microphone?
Yes, I will. Could you sign a waiver real quick for the parents? Oh, no. All right. Woo! All right. Give it up for, I forgot your name already. Elizabeth, give it up for Elizabeth. Thank you. We have no prize. You can sit down. All right, so this is really cool. Coming up, we have an opportunity actually for some of the youth to get to know Trevor. We have an event coming up this week.
1721. This is so. Anybody know what See You at the Pole is? That's this Wednesday. Students all around the nation gather around flagpoles in front of their schools and they pray for the nation, for the school. So that's this Wednesday. That happens early in the morning. Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, we are meeting here at this building. All the students who are meeting here, we are going to South Point Church where 1721 is held. That's a huge youth rally called See You After the Pole. So we need you guys, if you want to come and do that with us, you need to fill out a waiver or permission slip. I don't know what you guys call them here. But we have them at the information table. We have them at the information table if you want to go. If you show up here, plan on going with us. We're going to carpool from there. So show up at 6 o'clock. We'll leave at 6:15. I think it'll probably last somewhere around to like 8 or 9-ish. So text your parents and let them know, I guess. But yeah, so that'll be fun. Come on out. 6 o'clock here at the church this Wednesday, and we'll leave at 6:15. We'll carpool out. Cool. See you guys there.
Yeah, give it up for Trevor.
Thank you, guys.
That is so. That's super exciting. Long overdue. We're very excited to have our first full-time youth pastor, and thank you because that's because of you guys, your commitments, and your contributions moving forward. So I'm going to pray for Trevor. I'm going to pray for his ministry in the future, and just let's do that right now. Father God, I thank you so much for how you work and just the people that you've worked through here in this church. And the people you're going to continue to work through. I thank you for Trevor and bringing him our way. I pray for his ministry. I pray for the middle school and high school people that attend this church. And I pray for the ones that are out there in the community that don't even know they're about to attend this church and be a part of that ministry. God, I pray that you'd be working and moving and that your Spirit would do incredible things in the lives of students who are looking for a faith of their own. And I just pray that in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so let's clap one more time. So here's what I want to do to wrap up this week, or this series. What I want to do is I want to give you a few verses, and these verses all have a common theme. This is why we give, right? Obviously, we talked about last week, the reason we're generous is because there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of things ahead of us. There's people that need discipled. There's youth and students that we need to reach. There's a lot of whys that we're filling in that blank. But there's also a reason that we give, and we started to talk about this last week, is that there is this thing inside of us holding on to what God has given us, and we have a hard time letting it go. And when we let it go, God matures us. He grows us up. So last week, you made commitments. Maybe today you're going to come up and grab a magnet after the service, and you're going to make that commitment. I want you to know that commitment it's the fun part, the easy part. It gets difficult, and I know this from firsthand experience, when you come up on December, a few months from now, and you're going to be like, you're buying presents for your kids or your grandkids, or you're spending money here and there, and then you're just be like, oh yeah, I made a commitment like forever ago, though. Is that still happening? Right? Like that commitment seems like a long time, or it's not front and center. But I want us to remember in those moments that God's doing something in our hearts, not just what's happening in the church overall, but God's doing something in our hearts. Or next summer, what's going to happen is you're going to be like coming up, and you're like thinking about a vacation, and there's going to be a time where you might have to sacrifice a plan. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like we're making a commitment here in September, and then all the way next May, that might diminish the vacation you're able to go on, right? That's where the rubber really meets the road. And I've been there, and I've just been like, oh, why did I commit things to God, right? You know what I mean? But I want you to know, in those moments, in those times, that's where, not in this moment, but in that moment, that's where God really matures us and grows us up. And in those moments, here's what I want you to hear. I want you to hear these 3 passages of Scripture that remind you it's not just about what the church's budget looks like or what we're trying to accomplish through the church. I I want you to remember that this is a work that God is doing collectively in all of us. So the first passage is this. And you might want to take pictures of these with your phone. We do have a message in the message app on the phone. You might want to save these. These are scriptures that you want to remember. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 says this. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Now back then, when Jesus said this, there was no such thing as Fifth Third Bank, okay? If you had something, right, the first objective in life is to get enough to pay for your food and live indoors and wear clothes, right? But then anything additional to what you had to pay for your basic needs literally went into a room in your house. And some people didn't even need a whole room, right? They just needed a little slot in the wall. That's where it was. We put the coin there that has value. But some people would get obsessed with collecting, right? So they would have a whole room. It might be just a simple closet, but it would be an interior room in the house that was essentially a first century safe. And they would put in their valuables. One of the valuables they might put in there are clothes. So if you had a really fancy wardrobe, something like this, shirt from JCPenney and Tractor Supply pants right here. These are Tractor Supply has some good pants, people. If you had some fancy clothes, then you would put them in here and you would hold on to them because you might need to sell those or you might need to wear them, but they were very valuable at the time. Or you'd put your gold, you'd put your silver, you'd put things in there. And Jesus warns, listen, when you do that, that's where your heart is. Now, we don't do that, right? You might have a box somewhere in your house, or maybe you're afraid of the government or something, and you have a hole that you've dug gold. Anyway, you might do that. Some of you might do that. In Missouri, where I was for 12 years, people did that. Anyway, that's where I'm going. I'm digging up some people's backyards if there's ever a Walking Dead type of thing that happens. Anyway, you probably don't do that, but you have a savings account, or you have a 401k, or you have a Roth, or you have CDs, or you have stocks. That's what we do, and we store up for that stuff. But if you ever watch it, you ever watch the stocks? Do you ever watch what's happening with your money, or you just maybe it's just your checking account? You log in, you're like, what happened, right? And it just kind of goes. Back then, that's what they would do with their house. They would obsess over this house. They would have to lock it up. They would have to make sure that people don't come and steal it. And then moths would come in and they would destroy this clothing was worth a lot of money, and it would all go away and it would deteriorate. And when you would store it up, there your heart is. That's the imagery Jesus has. So he says this. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Every time you make a decision to not put your treasure here on earth, in that bank account or in that vault you have in your house or in that CD or in that 401k or in that investment, every time you make a decision or in your checking account to not put your treasure here but to put it in heaven, God's growing you up. That's what happens. And today you made a decision, or last week you made a decision, man, I'm going to do this instead of that. But 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, when you're making that decision and the rubber meets the road and it gets tough to put your trust in heaven, not here on earth, not in what you have, not what you've been able to pool together, that's where God grows us up, he matures us, and he teaches us to put our trust in him, not in what we've collected. Because he says, last verse, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's not figurative. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So literally, wherever your treasure is, if it's located at Fifth Third, if it's located in your house, that's where, if it's here on earth, that's where your heart is. If it's in heaven, then that's where your heart is. So that's the first verse, Matthew chapter 6. Remember that. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul talks about giving, generosity. He goes to the Corinth church and he says this. Now he who supplies seed to the sower, right? He's talking about giving, he's talking about generosity, he's talking about money. He says, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. So in this scenario, it's actually a passage we started to read last week. You are the sower. You're the person going out planting stuff. He says, hey, you only reap what you sow. So you go out there and you plant a lot, you're going to reap a lot. You go out there and you sow a little, you're only going to get back. There's a cause and effect. And I want you to remember that. Because he says it will increase the harvest of righteousness. Now, I don't like using this verse a lot because it's been misused by every televangelist and every Yahoo preacher you've ever heard. Right? And they're just like, so we need you to sow a seed today. If you'll just sow that seed today of $3,000, right? And to send in your money, and then they promise you're going to be driving a Mercedes tomorrow, right? That's how that works. It's not what he's saying. He's not saying, man, you send in your money, right? You make your donation, and then God's going to make you rich. This is not a get-rich marketing scheme. That's not what this is. He says, man, if you sow, if you take what God's given you and you plant, what you're going to harvest back is what? Righteousness. It's not going to increase. It's not going to increase. You're not going to make you rich. This isn't an investment plan so you can drive a Cadillac and live in a four-bedroom house. That's not what this is. This is, no, you're going to sow, you're going to plant, and because you do that, you're going to harvest back people who are giving their life to God. You're going to harvest back this free spirit where you get let go of God's treasure and where you get let go of it and you don't hang on to it. You're going to harvest righteousness. And where the rubber meets the road is, sometimes we'd rather take the cash, wouldn't we? If behind two doors up here I said, hey, on the one hand, there's righteousness, and on the other hand, $5,000, right? Most of us, we'd go, I'll take the money, I'll take the cash, put it in my hand, right? God's saying, no, I'd rather you harvest righteousness. So he says this, and this is the verse to take to heart. He says, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. Catch that, because that's important. He says, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. So if you take what I've given you and you go out there and sow it and you harvest righteousness, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you more so that you can sow more. Not so you can get rich and buy a plane, right? But so that you can sow more. It's kind of like in my house. If one of my kids comes up to me and is like, hey, I need $5. Well, and I hand them $5, which I would never do. I would never give my child something for nothing, right? Anyway, but let's just say I'm in a generous mood and I'm like, here you go, here's $5, without even telling them to mow the lawn or anything. Anyway, so I give them $5. And they go out there and they buy a bunch of candy and they bring it back to their house, and they eat it all themselves. And somebody asks if they can take a bite or if they can share, probably me, and they say, no, this is mine. What am I going to do next time that kid wants $5? I'm not going to give it to him. But in fact, I'll probably take that $5 and be like, you want this? I'm going to give it to your sister right here and go right in front of you, you little selfish brat. Anyway, what would I do? But if I see one of my kids and they're like, hey, can I have $5? And then they go drop it in an offering bucket, or they do something generous with that, or they go buy food for the whole family, right? I'll be like, yeah, I'll give you. Next time they come for $5, I'll probably give them $10. When God views us, that's what he does. If you are a miser with your money, if you don't want to let go of it, all you can think about is what can I do for me, and how can I help me, and how can I increase my quality of life, and how can I make my life better? Why would God give you anything? It's amazing he even lets some of us eat and live indoors, right? But he lets us do that, but why would he give us anything? And he says, no, you will be enriched. If you find yourself taking what God has given you and sowing it in the place that God has given you, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. So here's the point. A few months from now, next year, when you're fulfilling these commitments, when you're making this big heart decision to give instead of hold on, I want you to remember that, because there is so much more that can happen as God enriches all of us to be able to sow righteousness. Another verse I'm going to give you. This is the last verse I'll give you. It's a good passage. 1 Timothy chapter 6. Just catch this one. If you're going to take a picture, you take a picture of this. 1 Timothy 6. Yep, 1 Timothy 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Yeah, if you're looking for a tattoo, just put that somewhere on you, right? Except don't spend money on tattoo. You need to be more content. Anyway, no, I'm just teasing. But godliness with contentment is great gain. I'll tell you what, and the older you get, the more you know this, right? Right? Contentment's the answer. More is not the answer. When has more ever really made you happy? Has it ever been the answer? I remember my entire life, I wanted a motorcycle. I wanted a motorcycle more than anything in the world, and I thought, man, if I just had a nice motorcycle, my life would be great. So this guy comes up to me one time. I think God just taught me a lesson. He said, hey, here's a Harley, and you can have it for the next 4 months. And I was like, really? And he was my size, and he had the leathers and everything. So I got to be a biker for 4 months. I'm like, this is the greatest thing on earth. And the more I do this, the more likely my wife's going to be like, let me borrow our Harley. So he had a V-Rod Harley, right? This is a nice Harley. I drove that thing around all the time. Every single day I woke up and drove that Harley. And about 3 months after driving this $30,000 Harley around all the time, I was like, right? It wasn't the answer to life. I didn't even drive it around the last month. I drove it a few times, but I gave it back to the guy, and ever since then, I've been like, I never want to spend another dime on a motorcycle, right? How many of you have ever done that? You were like, happiness will be found in a boat. How many people know that's not true, right? Expenses are found in a boat. Rent boats. Anyway, I'm not slamming anybody who has a boat. Anyway, happiness is going to be found if I get that house. Happiness is going to be if I get that car. Happiness is going to be where I can look the way I want to, right? We always think that happiness is with what more, but when you get more, what do you want? You want more. And then when you get more, what do you want? You want more. And there is this part of you always screaming for more. And God tries to teach us this new thing, and he says, contentment's the key. You want peace. Peace isn't going to come from more. Peace is going to be being content with you have. But godliness with contentment is great gain. But he tells why. Next verse, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Listen, anything that you have is an improvement from what you had to begin with, right? Right? Anything that you have is better than being a naked baby. You're in a lot better spot than you were when you came to this earth. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Will we? He says if we have food and clothing, which are two things that God promises you, if we have food and we have clothing, and in Michigan, a house, right? He didn't live in Michigan in the winter, right? But if you have the basic needs, if you have the ability to get a job, to earn money, and to provide for your basic needs, you can say anything else we get on top of that is just a bonus. Then you have learned the art of contentment, and that's where peace lies. And so a couple months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when you're fulfilling your commitment, when you're taking this piece of you and you're placing and you're putting it ahead of God, and there's all these other things in the world that are screaming, no, this is important, this is more important. What you're learning is the art of being content with what God has given you. That's where true peace lies. Next verse. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation. Now listen, want to get rich. He's not talking about rich people. He's talking about people that want to get rich. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. Anybody play the lottery? You wanted to get rich, right? I'm not saying it's bad to play the lottery. If you did, by all means, grab a magnet. Anyway, those who... take the rest of them. But I'm just saying, right? We all fit in that category. It isn't about whether you have money or don't have money. It's about that want to in your heart. Those who want to get rich fall into a temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. You've seen that happen in your own life. You've seen that pull. You've watched other people do it. Maybe you've plunged yourself. Maybe that's the thing that has drawn you away from the faith, that you weren't content with what God gave you, and so it pulled you away from your faith. Because faith is all about saying, God, I know you're going to provide. But maybe that desire to get rich, the desire to open up that room in our house and see the treasure, that stuff that we want to experience, that pull is so alluring that instead of being content with what God gives, we go the other way. And he's saying it can pull you right out of faith. It can pull you right out of your salvation. It can pull you away from the hope of eternal life. Don't do it. So the next verse goes like this. You've heard this one. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Not money, but the love of money. And again, we apply this to rich people, right? We apply this to people we see in Hollywood. We apply this to somebody that lives down the road from us or somebody that lives in the nice section in town, right? We apply that to those people. He's not talking about those people. He's talking about all of us who are not content with what we have. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. When we make a decision to give, to be generous, to fulfill our commitment to God, to do that, we are making a decision to be content, to put God first and put our faith in Him, not in ourselves. The last verse continues on. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So here's what we're doing. Over and over again, we're saying, my life, my world is not about money. My life is about my faith in Christ. Man, if you're making a commitment today, or you already made a commitment, or maybe you don't even go to church here, no matter what happens, as you move on with your life, make those decisions over and over and over again to be generous with what you have so that you can grow in faith, so that you can harvest righteousness, so that you can find true peace that comes from the contentment of what you have. Let me pray for you. God, I pray as all of us look at our hearts and our checking accounts and all of the things that you've blessed us with, our investments. And God, as we seek to figure out and to try to honor you with those, I pray that we would surrender everything that has been given us into your hands. God, that we would be more interested in your kingdom, in harvesting righteousness, in peace, than we would be in the stuff that we desire and want the most. God, we surrender to you our everything. God, we put everything that we have right now in a pile in front of you. We simply surrender it and say, God, it is all yours. And I pray that in Christ's name. Amen.